Hello, listeners. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or followed the Sounds of Living podcast accounts, you could find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Patreon at Sounds of Living Podcast. Any donation would be greatly appreciated to help support my journey of taking Sounds of Living around the United States. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to Sounds of Living. I'm your host today, Alex Kellerman, and I'm sitting here with one of my good friends, Andrew Davis. Andrew, say what's up.
Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is Andrew. Right now I am a senior at the University of Arizona. I'm studying environmental science. Going to finish my degree really soon, and I'm really excited. And I'm glad to be here today on the Sounds of Living.
It's awesome, man. Why don't you tell us more about yourself? Like, what got you into music in the first place?
Yeah, so I feel like music's always been a really big part of my family. Anytime that my parents are cooking or we're just in the house together and there's downtime and we're not, actively engaging with each other, then there's music going. And my dad played so much classic rock when I was growing up. I remember, when I'd go outside and play in the front yard and stuff, he had the stereo system all set up in the garage and just playing all sorts of classic music. I have a lot of knowledge in classic rock. Like, I know so many songs because I heard them all the time, but I don't know the names or like the artists or stuff. So recently I've been getting back into classic rock and putting names to faces, as it were, with the music. As I kind of grew up and I went out on my own to look for music, I always had headphones in or something playing. I'd always listen to music when I was doing homework, or like first time I got my hands on a Bluetooth speaker, my parents were always telling me to turn it down and stuff. I feel like music has always been like a constant for me. It kind of acts as like a backdrop, it helps me set my mood and, approach things. It's like the backdrop.
I like that word, backdrop. You're like, this is the mood I want to be in, this is what I play.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's a good way of putting it, a good word to associate with it.
I've never been great at regulating my emotions. I've always had to really, learn a lot of skills and stuff to help me. When it comes to waking up in the morning and feeling nervous and feeling behind or feeling like you have a lot ahead of you, for me, just being able to throw on a song and embrace the mood of that song really puts me in a place to go and tackle the day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can be in, whatever setting. Just kind of helps me feel and process the way I feel way better.
That makes sense. So why don't you tell us about your first long-term relationship and what music was incorporated in your life at the time?
I had my first really long-term relationship my freshman, sophomore year of high school. I dated this girl for about a year and a half, and I came to find out that she had been cheating on me. At the time, being that it was my first long-term relationship, I was navigating these feelings for the first time. I had quote-unquote dated a girl before that, maybe once or twice, but it was nothing close to what I had done then with the year-long relationship. And so when it came to an end, me as a sophomore in high school, it was a big part of my life that kind of went away in a flash, and assumptions about my life that also went away in a flash, that I had this person, had my feelings reciprocated by this person, all of that kind of went away, and I felt kind of lost. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I was lost in kind of the idea of dating or the idea of relationships, and I didn't know where I was going from there. It was also a time where my mom was having a lot of surgery. She was not diagnosed, but they had found that she had the breast cancer gene, and it runs in my family. And so we had decided to do preventative surgery. Well, it ended up spiraling into complication after complication. And so there was that aspect of my life too. All in all, I just felt really kind of shaken up. A lot of my assumptions about life were shaken up. So music was something that I clung to because, once again, it could help me process how I felt about it. It could help me set my own mood and kind of see myself within the situation.
What music specifically helped you get through those moments?
There was one album that I was just front to back listening to all the time. It's by Corday. Back then he was YBN Corday, now just Corday. His album, The Lost Boy. And it's kind of like a jazz rap, slower project. He kind of explores all these themes of being lost, having these vague ideas about what your life should be like or how you should feel. And apart from just being what I think is really good music, even though I might not have been experiencing exactly what he was, I still felt in a similar place to him. And listening to the music and feeling somebody else, pour their heart out on a track who was feeling the same thing as me gave me some kind of structure, some kind of support, I feel like, to get through that. So yeah, The Lost Boy, I remember I went on a trip to Seattle for a family member's wedding. I kind of romanticized it a little bit. I was in Seattle for the first time. I don't travel that often. Just got out of that relationship, and my mom's struggling. And I just remember being in a new setting and having that music and just seeing myself kind of from the third person view. I took that time in Seattle to process. And I feel like that music, that album specifically, really kind of gave me the emotional tools to process it and see myself for who I am and not be too hard on myself.
What exactly did they talk about in the album?
There's a track on the album called Bad Idea, and the chorus is, "It might not be such a bad idea if I never went home again." It's a really kind of slow song, but it has a couple verses. One of them's from Chance the Rapper, and it really just kind of explores themes of feeling lost and feeling like you don't know yourself. And you're trying to figure out who you are and where you want to be in life. And when I was super in my feelings and I was out on this trip to Seattle, I was thinking to myself, maybe it would be the best thing for me to move somewhere else or find something new in life. Maybe not physically move to another location, but move to a different place mentally. And it might not be such a bad idea if I never went home, or rather never went back to how I felt before and the assumptions that I had about life before and the kind of the way that I carried myself. The album also explores a lot of themes of growing up and leaving behind kind of your more innocent and carefree side and kind of accepting bad things happen and that you learn and grow through them, and that you may not end up going back home to the same exact place you were emotionally before, but that's okay. You learn, you grow, you change as a person. Where he is emotionally in the music, I really empathized with, and I felt like it kind of captured my own mental state.
So then how does that lead into graduating high school and moving on to college? Did that music carry on with you? How did it evolve?
I actually recently, in preparation for this podcast, went back and did a full front-to-back listen for the first time in a while. But a lot of the songs from the album are sprinkled throughout some of my playlists, and when they come on, I kind of flash back to those times, and I feel good about it because the end result of all those shakeups, I feel like, was I grew up a little bit. I matured. I sort of realized that things aren't always going to be the same, where my family and myself were just as vulnerable to failure and bad things as anybody else. And so I felt like it made me grow up a little bit. When I started college, I'll give some background here. My high school graduating class was 8 people. It was a very small high school. It was actually K through 12. It was very structured. I had the same 7 classmates. Never had any issue remembering when things were due because all of my homies were in the same classes. If there's a test, I know that because all my homies are studying and talking about it. The school also didn't allow anything to be done digitally. It was all on paper. So you can imagine that as I transitioned from that to the university setting with 40,000 some students enrolled during COVID and it being entirely online, which is something I had never done before, it was very, very new. Everything about it was new to me. I had never experienced school in that kind of setting, and I was also away from home. So once again, a lot of my assumptions and a lot of my routines in life were shaken up. I couldn't rely on the things I had relied on before in school. So my first year at university, I failed some classes. I was right back in that same spot again where I felt lost. I felt like I had put a lot of myself into my academics in high school, and I had, to a degree, conflated it with my identity too much. So when I started to not do as well in school, that really took a toll on my self-worth and how I viewed myself. And so I was right back in that same place again. And the music that really helped me process that is from AJJ. It used to stand for Andrew Jackson Jihad, but they changed it. I think it's an old band. That's probably the music that was most defining for me in that time.
AJJ, what specifically about them helped you get through that period where you didn't know how to adjust to an online schooling? Tell me more about the music itself.
So AJJ is a folk punk band. They take a lot of inspiration from like Ludi Guthrie. They take a lot of inspiration from bands like Neutral Milk Hotel, Ghost Mice, Mountain Goats. Those are some similar bands. They're from Arizona, actually. They explore a lot of themes of internal suffering and themes of shame and guilt and cowardice and, self-doubt, self-hate, that kind of thing. They explore those themes in context of the bigger picture being like the greater kind of state of how everybody else is living and the situations that everybody else is in. Finding myself feeling sorry for myself, feeling like my life is slipping. This person that I thought I was is being shattered because I'm not as successful in school anymore. It was great to have their music because first they would empathize with me and I would feel heard and seen. Then at the same time, they would empathize with the rest of the people. They talk a lot about like homelessness and being on the streets and being a junkie. They have songs that talk about things that they've witnessed in Phoenix, in Tucson. There's a song where he says something like, "My friend says, at best, we're all 2 or 3 bad decisions away of becoming the ones that we fear and pity. And my other friend says that it's important to bear some witness when you can, and that's not hard to do in the city that I live in." And those lyrics really hit for, living in South Tucson and attending a school that costs $10,000+ a semester. I can walk 100 feet west of here and count 10, 12 homeless people who are living, with nothing. The songs and the pieces from AJJ let me feel my emotions and let me validate my emotions, but then also let me understand that what I'm going through and what I'm facing is not the end of the world, and that people go through harder things day in, day out, meters away from me. It helped me, once again, recontextualize myself, understand myself in context of where I was in my life, and once again, be empathetic towards myself, but then get up and say, all right, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to make the changes I need to make.
That makes a lot of sense. Did you have any songs in particular that were more strong on those emotions that you were going through and ideas and thoughts that you were having about what was going on around you?
There's a song by AJJ. It's called People to Two. Still people in. So I'm going to read an excerpt of these lyrics here, and I feel like it illustrates really well what I'm trying to get across. If you've been kicked in or abused or mistreated or misused, you were told there was nowhere to go but up for you. If you've been hurt or you've been betrayed or you've been fucked or you've been displaced, you were told it was probably your fault anyway. But when your hustler subscription and your Xanax prescriptions make you feel lonelier instead, you don't want to hear about all those starving children. You don't want to be told it's all in your head. Because if it's all in your head, that's terrible. So I feel like they're empathizing with the fact that, when you experience suffering, that is wholly unique to you, because your situation is unique, right, from anybody else's. They also bring up the fact that if you are suffering and you are, feeling depressed and you're also an empathetic person, you can look to things you hear in the news, of tragedies going on. And you can, just in Tucson, looking out your window and seeing people living on the streets and knowing that their material conditions are objectively way worse than yours. I live in an air-conditioned, nice house. I don't have to worry about my next meal. And this person has it so much worse than me. Why do I feel sad? And do I even deserve to feel sad? And should I be ashamed of feeling sad given that I have all these things? I'm going to read these next lyrics that I mentioned earlier. My friend Aaron says it best, we're all 2 or 3 bad decisions away from becoming the ones that we fear and pity. And Tony says it's important to bear some witness when you can, and that's not hard to do in the city that I live in. You don't have it any better, you don't have it any worse. You're an irreplaceable human soul with your own understanding of what it means to suffer, and that's a huge bummer. I just think that it really helped me separate myself from I'm already feeling depressed or anxious, right? And it helped me see that I can't let the fact that I'm feeling this way make me feel this way even worse. And yeah, there are people who have it so much worse than you, but you're your own person with your own understanding of suffering, and ultimately it's real to you. You need to work through that either way. Like millionaires and famous actors and stuff commit suicide. Robin Williams committed suicide. People might say, oh, he had everything, right? He was rich, he was famous, but ultimately he's an irreplaceable human soul with his own understanding of what it means to suffer. And if you can't address that and you can't get over that, you're not going to make it out. I think for people like you and I who are really empathetic and we can really feel what other people are feeling, it can be really difficult to justify your own feelings of sadness when other people, quote unquote, deserve to feel sad way more than you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a very complicated topic, but it makes sense. I mean, we all deserve to feel what we're feeling. And what I think is crazy is that there has to be a competition on who has it worse.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's all different because we all have different experiences. So I'm glad that you have multiple songs that are able to embody those emotions and explain what it is that's going on in the world. You know? Like that's those lyrics. What song was that from?
So that's from a song. It's called People 2 2.
People 2 2. Okay.
Yeah. So it's people and then 2 in Roman numerals and then the number 2.
Okay.
They did a series of songs called People, and there was People, then People 2, and then People 2 2. But yeah, that's what that song's called. There's also a song off of one of their more recent albums. They put out an album in 2020, so this was right when I was kind of in the midst going through it, called Good Luck Everybody. And it was a project kind of commentating on the state of politics at the time, the state of people and their connection to one another, and how a lot of themes of people are losing connection to one another in the real world and kind of sinking into being online and being in this state of kind of constant depression, like you have this constant feed of horrible things happening in the world, and that people were losing contact with each other. And yeah, I'm going to pull up the lyrics for one of the songs off of that album here. There's a song off of that album called Normalization Blues. In the song, the lead singer, Sean, is talking about how as politics in America has kind of been devolving to craziness, that there's this kind of shift in our minds where we get bombarded with all of this bad news all the time that we start to be numb to it. And then we have all of these crazy things happening in the political world that we begin to normalize it. And so the song Normalization Blues, he's talking about how he's beginning to feel himself kind of become numb to what's going on. So he says, I can feel my brain changing, acclimating to the madness. I can feel my outrage shift into a dull, despondent sadness. At the time, I really empathized with this because in my major, environmental science, we talk a lot about climate change and pollution and these really big existential threats. You kind of get a first row seat to what is being done about it, more so what is not being done about it. And so it was very easy for me to slip into this, like he says, dull, despondent sadness, feeling like things are bad, they're only going to get worse, and there's nothing I can do about it. Just having a song like this where it really hits that, what I feel like is a niche emotion and a niche kind of feeling, really just kind of helps me work through that emotion and see it as like my person that I can feel and see and have it be something that I'm aware of, want to affect positive change about, but not something that consumes me, makes me feel hopeless.
So then, for your final pivotal point, you wanted to talk about your experiences as a camp counselor at a summer camp.
Yes.
How does that all play into this era of figuring out who you are in high school to then in college? You had the summer camp throughout that whole, all those experiences. Like, how did that play into your processing of things?
The 2 points that we've talked about so far were like very big turn on a dime points where I had to face something and I had to work through something and I had to adapt to change. And obviously, we've been kind of talking about some sadder times in my life. So I wanted to shift to what I have really, really fond memories about this camp. So when I was about like 13, my mom signed me up for a summer camp, and I went. I was probably being annoying about it and thinking like, oh, Mom, I'm not gonna like it, whatever. But I remember when she picked me up, I wanted to stay. I absolutely loved it. And so I kept going, and then when I was 15, I was finally old enough to do this program they had called Counselor in Training. And you did the program, and then for the rest of the summer, you kind of worked as like a pseudo-counselor with somebody watching over your shoulder. Then the next summer when I was 16, I was a fully fledged counselor, and then I just kept working there. And this most recent summer 2023, is the first summer that I haven't worked there. Spending my summer there every single year, I think really, really shaped me as a person. It's a sleepaway camp, so it runs the whole summer. Kids come for a week duration. You work yourself and another counselor in a cabin, and you have a group of kids assigned to you, about 10 kids. When you are a young person yourself, 16, 17, 18, and you are working with kids, helping them work through their emotions, we tell this to people when we train them, but they're just little humans. They have the same emotions as you, and the scale might be different, but they have the same problems as you. When you are helping another person work through their problems, you're an objective voice, right? And you can kind of see things that in your own mind, thinking of yourself, you wouldn't see. Just being the adult and being like the counselor and being the person who the kids talk to. And then also, it's a pretty big responsibility to have 10 kids under your watch in the middle of the woods, right? So I think it gave me a lot of opportunity to grow up. And I think that each summer, I learned more about myself and grew up a little bit more. But the biggest thing that I took away from that camp was that it taught me two things that I hold very dear today, and that's humility and forgiveness. Humility in terms of not assuming that you know everything, not assuming that you already have it figured out, assuming from the beginning that you don't know what you're doing, you don't have it figured out, and that you can learn from other people, and that other people have valuable things to say and hear. And then forgiveness, people tend to think of forgiveness as being like a gift that you give somebody to let them off the hook. If somebody hits my car, I'm like, you know what, dude, I forgive you. It's all good. I'm like letting them off of the hook of having to deal with that. But really what forgiveness is something that when you forgive somebody, you're doing that for yourself. If you can let go of your ego and let go of self-importance and see people for who they really are, which is, flawed people doing their best, you can save yourself a lot of mental anguish by forgiving people. And, the reason I learned that is because if you are to try and do a summer working with kids and you can't forgive a kid for some dumb stuff that they did, one time a kid cracked my phone. If you can't let that stuff go and you can't let little things just slide and you can't come around and say, you know what, you really upset me today. My day was made a lot more difficult because of you, but I forgive you and I'm going to let it go and we're going to move on. We're going to have a fun night together. You are put in that position as a camp counselor, and you get to practice having humility and having forgiveness and helping kids work through their emotions. And what ends up happening is that you sort of realize that this is universal. It's not just this kid has been annoying all day and I'm going to forgive him and let it go because I want to get some sleep tonight. It's also this person in my life, my ex maybe, was abusive, and I'm going to forgive them within myself so that I can move on. Also, to be able to approach situations like that, like the shakeups I've had before, with humility and say, I accept that I don't know quite yet what to do and that I don't have it all figured out and that I need to admit when I'm wrong, learn where my weaknesses are, and be able to accept that and work on myself without letting ego get in the way.
So with all of those experiences and life lessons you've learned, would you say that Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, All the Small Things by Blink-182, and Good Riddance by Green Day were just songs that just stuck through that time at the summer camp where you were learning that, or did you take on the messages that they had in the songs? Like, what exactly, other than the experience itself, did the songs play a part in it, or was it just like the soundtrack to figuring out all of those things?
Yeah, I chose these songs not necessarily for their content, more for my emotional connection to them. let me give you the background here. The weekly schedule, right, for camp, kids are there for a week. You as the counselor, you work 6 days, 24 hours a day, and then you have a 24-hour period off from Saturday to Sunday, and then you get the next batch of kids. On Thursdays, right, we're nearing the end of the week, we would host what we called the dance. It was more like just a fun party, but all of the kids, from 6 to 16 would get to partake in the dance, and we'd have the camp store open, and we'd have music going. And at the end of the night, every week, and this was tradition, there'd be 3 songs that they played at the end of the night at the dance, one of them being the YMCA song, because it was a YMCA camp. But we'd play All the Small Things by Blink-182, and there's a specific part of the song when they say, "Work sucks, I know." All of the counselors would just belt out "Work sucks, I know," because work sucked. It was fun, obviously, but it was work, man, 24 hours a day with these kids. The last song would be Good Riddance by Green Day. And when I hear that song now, it'll bring me to my knees, basically, because I just have all of these beautiful memories, from when I was a kid going to when I was working to when I was running aspects of the camp. And at the very end of the Green Day song, you would grab a couple of your buddies and form a little circle and just spin together as fast as you could and let go when the song ends, and you'd all fall to the ground. You just let out all of that energy and emotion from the week. And so those songs are really, really important to me. And then at the very, very end of the week, right, when all these kids are waiting to go home, we have them all rounded up in the dining hall together. We would eventually play Bohemian Rhapsody. And once again, this was a tradition at the camp for a very long time, I think, since Bohemian Rhapsody came out. We would play Bohemian Rhapsody, and there's a dance that we did for the whole thing. Little parts of it. Someone would always take the guitar solo, slide on the ground and do the guitar solo and just go crazy. And then the very end, when the song sort of breaks down and it's just the music, everybody would just go climb something. Your goal was to climb something and get higher up. So we'd all climb up in the rafters of the dining hall, be shaking our fists and bobbing our heads and stuff, and all of the kids just absolutely loved it. They think you're the coolest fucking person ever. They think this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. All these counselors who they idolize are all enjoying this song together. For a lot of kids, that's what locks them into oh my gosh, I love this place. I want to come back. I want to work here.
Would you say that's what made you go back?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I first went and I experienced that for the first time, it just felt like all these counselors all loved each other and were this wonderful little community of friends. Obviously, when you're a kid, you idolize your counselor. I right then and there, I want to be a part of this. This is so cool. You're not expecting it the first time. I've experienced that every single week of every single summer for the past 10-ish years. To this day, when I hear Bohemian Rhapsody or All the Small Things or Good Riddance, and if I'm with a friend who worked at the summer camp with me, we hear that song, we look at each other, and it's just all the memories come flooding back. Those songs just encapsulate all of that for me, and I love them to death. And I'm glad that I can have this opportunity to share what they mean to me in particular,
Yeah, I'm really glad that you have those positive memories associated with those songs, because they're just so important to have those pivotal moments in your life be defined by the music you love.
Yeah, I feel like also I have a really bad memory. It's very hard for me to, once a year or two has gone by, to be able to bring things to mind really easily and remember certain things. And having music attached to memories makes them so much more accessible to me. And I feel like it helps me remember and reminisce,
Of course. So before we go, I know that you had talked a lot about forgiveness and humility and how it's been a huge part of just navigating life in itself. What would you like to say to the audience that is maybe related to those topics, or just something that you think is important for them to know in general?
If there's one thing I can get out there to all of you listeners, one thing that I think is important, I want to say that I'm grateful for Alex for giving me this platform. Because, I believe that everybody has something to say. Everybody deserves to have that thing heard. Nobody deserves it particularly more than anybody else. And so I'm grateful and lucky that I have this opportunity here today. And so with that being said, humbly, I think that some of the most important things in life are humility and forgiveness. I think that approaching situations without an ego, approaching situations with the assumption that you could be wrong, that you could be in the wrong, that you may have to reevaluate parts of yourself, that you may have to relearn thinking patterns. I think that when you approach life like that, you are just priming yourself to be able to take things as they come and change for the better, instead of having to navigate. When you navigate things with an ego, right, you don't give yourself the opportunity to change. You don't give yourself the opportunity to grow because you assume that you don't need to. You assume that you're already there, that you are already good enough, that you've got it figured out, or that you're better than somebody, or that you know better than them, right? For myself personally, if I had approached my first year of college and the results of my first year of college with anything but humility, there's a good chance I wouldn't still be in college today, that I wouldn't have progressed, because I had to take a step back and I had to say, hey, I'm not the super smart, can do anything student that I thought I was. I'm not like the top of the top, that I do need to take a step back and I do need to relearn how to do these things, and I need to accept my shortcomings. The other side of that coin is forgiveness, because forgiveness is essentially doing the same thing but for another person, accepting that that person isn't perfect, that that person will probably change, and that if somebody has hurt you, accepting that probably wasn't their intention, and that them hurting you doesn't make them, entirely bad. For instance, I recently broke up with a girl that I dated for a really long time, and it would be very easy for me to look at some of the things she did to me with hate and spite and say, she's the worst, good riddance, and she's all bad. But to be able to forgive that person and say, she's a human being and she's not perfect, and things she did to me, she might regret them and she will probably come to change as a person. Doing that allows you to get a grip on the reality of the situation. And, by forgiving that person, you also can see your own shortcomings better. You can say, okay, you know what? She wasn't just an asshole. Maybe she had points here and there. And you know what? It wasn't just all bad. Maybe I played some role in that. And I just think if you approach situations, especially tough situations, especially situations that make you feel vulnerable or make you feel like your ego is being checked, if you approach them with humility, it allows you to forgive yourself. And when you approach them with forgiveness, it allows you to forgive other people. And I think that the end result of that is you being able to get a more objective view of the situation, and ultimately a less painful view of the situation, and one where you can grow and change and learn from it and be better for it. But it's hard. It's hard to let your ego go, and it takes a while to get there. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah. All very good points, and it's important to respect each other's perspectives and experiences and be humble. So again, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your perspective and experiences. I think that it's important for everyone to know what you're going through and how you process things and gotten to where you are now.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for letting me come on and share these things. It's been wonderful. Yeah, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, for everybody out there listening, I wish you happiness and good health, and I will see you next episode.